Captain Jai-Ho Park stood motionless at the main viewport of the Earth exploration vessel Horizon, his weathered hands clasped tightly behind his back. The massive alien ship hanging in space before them made the Horizon look like a child's toy by comparison. Its sleek hull gleamed with an iridescent sheen that seemed to shift colors as it moved, technology far beyond anything humanity had created. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" Jai-Ho said to no one in particular, his voice betraying none of the anxiety churning in his stomach. 26 years in Earth's unified Space Force had prepared him for many things, but first contact with an advanced alien civilization wasn't one of them. Lieutenant Hannah Lee approached, her footsteps echoing on the metal deck. "Engineering reports all systems nominal, Captain. Medical and science teams are standing by." She paused, glancing at the alien vessel. "They're requesting permission to board, sir." Jai-Ho turned to face his first officer. Hannah's expression remained professional, but he caught the slight widening of her eyes, the only sign of the excitement and fear she must be feeling. She was young, brilliant, and had volunteered for this mission, knowing the risks of venturing beyond the solar system. "Very well," Jai-Ho said. "Have security teams at the docking bay, but weapons holstered. Diplomatic protocols are in effect." He straightened his uniform. "I'll meet our guests personally." The walk to the docking bay felt longer than usual. Crew members stopped their tasks to watch as Jai-Ho and Hannah passed, their faces a mixture of hope and apprehension. Humanity had been searching the stars for signs of intelligent life for centuries. Now that contact had finally been made, the weight of representing the entire human race pressed heavily on Jai-Ho's shoulders. Chief Security Officer Min-Soo waited at the airlock with 4 officers. "Security team ready, Captain," he reported, his hand resting near but not on his sidearm. "Remember," Jai-Ho addressed them all, "we represent Earth. First impressions matter." The airlock cycled with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Jai-Ho straightened his back and lifted his chin. The inner door slid open. 3 aliens ducked through the doorway. Jai-Ho had seen them through video transmissions, but nothing prepared him for the reality of the mirror standing before him. They stood nearly 2.5 meters tall, their bodies thin and graceful with 4 jointed arms. Their skin had a subtle pattern that reminded Jai-Ho of tree bark, in shades of blue and purple. Most striking were their eyes, large, almond-shaped, and completely black, set in narrow faces with no visible nose, just breathing slits. "Welcome aboard the Earth exploration vessel Horizon," Jai-Ho said, performing the formal bow that Earth's unified government had decided upon as a universal greeting. "I am Captain Jai-Ho Park." The central alien stepped forward. A small device on its chest glowed, and a mechanical voice emerged. "We are representatives of the Galactic Confederation. I am Senior Observer Talvek." The alien made a fluid gesture with its upper arms that might have been their version of a greeting. "This is my first officer, Lieutenant Hannah Lee, and Security Chief Min-Soo," Jai-Ho continued, gesturing to each. The alien studied them with those unsettling black eyes. "Your biological readings are unusual," Talvek said. "Your planet's designation in our systems is now confirmed as a Class 9 death world. Few sentient species evolve in such harsh conditions." Jai-Ho exchanged a quick glance with Hannah. "Death world. Earth is quite hospitable to us." One of the other aliens made a sound that the translator didn't catch. Talvek's head tilted. "Your gravity is crushing, your atmospheric pressure extreme, your radiation levels concerning, your temperature variations deadly, and your planet is covered in toxic oxygen. That you not only survived but achieved space travel is remarkable. We would be interested in learning more about your classification system," Hannah said diplomatically. "Perhaps we could exchange scientific data." "Of course," Talvek replied. "The Confederation encourages cultural and scientific exchange. Though caution is advised when dealing with Deathworld species, your inherent biology makes you naturally more durable and potentially more aggressive than most Confederation members." Jai-Ho felt his diplomatic smile stiffen but maintained it. I assure you, we come with peaceful intentions. Would you like to continue our discussion in our conference room? We've prepared refreshments, though I'm unsure if they would be suitable for your physiology. The aliens conferred briefly in their own language, a series of clicks and humming sounds. We accept, Talvek finally said. We have brought scanning devices to ensure your refreshments will not harm us. As they walked through the corridors of the horizon, crew members stopped and stared. Jai-Ho noticed how the aliens seemed to examine everything. The thickness of the walls, the environmental controls, the muscle density of the humans they passed. In the conference room, Science Officer Jun Seo waited with a display of Earth's solar system. His eyes widened when the aliens entered, but he recovered quickly. This is fascinating technology, one of the other aliens said, examining the holographic display. Quite advanced for a species at your development stage. Jai-Ho fought down a flicker of irritation. There was something condescending in the alien's tone that the translator couldn't quite mask. We're eager to learn, Jai-Ho said carefully. Humanity has always looked to the stars with wonder. Yes, wonder, Talvek said. Most species do, until they discover what actually lives among those stars. The alien paused. Your species survived on a death world. Fascinating. Primitive, but fascinating. Hannah's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered. We're curious about the Galactic Confederation. How many species are members? 37 full members, 22 provisional members, Talvek answered. Membership is determined by technological advancement, cultural stability, and biological categorization. And where would humans fall in this hierarchy? Jai-Ho asked. Provisional. Certainly. Your technology is adequate, though limited. Your unified planetary government is recent and untested. Your Deathworld biology is concerning. Talvek gestured with all four arms. Species evolved in high-stress environments tend toward aggression and territorial behavior. Jun Seo frowned. With respect, that's a generalization. Human history certainly has violence, but also cooperation, art, philosophy. Yes, impressive for Deathworlders, Talvek interrupted. We have studied your transmissions. Your entertainment media particularly showcases your species' fascination with conflict. Jai-Ho felt the conversation slipping away from the positive first contact he had hoped for. Perhaps we could focus on what we might offer each other. Earth has resources, unique perspectives. Physical strength, the third alien spoke for the first time. Endurance. Radiation resistance. These traits have military applications. The room fell silent. Jai-Ho met Talvek's black eyes steadily. Earth's Space Force is primarily exploratory and defensive. We're not looking to become anyone's soldiers. Talvek made a gesture that the humans couldn't interpret. Of course. The Confederation respects the development path of all species. We merely observe that Deathworlders often find certain opportunities available to them. Jai-Ho maintained his diplomatic smile, but his mind was racing. There was more happening here than a simple welcome to the galactic community. The Mira were assessing them, categorizing them, perhaps even planning how best to use humanity. We have much to learn from each other, Jai-Ho said carefully. Earth would be honored to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Confederation. Talvek's head tilted in what might have been agreement. The process will take time. Observers will need to assess your world, your people. The Confederation moves cautiously, especially with Deathworld species. Jai-Ho nodded, keeping his expression pleasant even as he made mental notes to share with Earth's government. The galaxy, it seemed, was not the welcoming place humanity had hoped for. It was political, hierarchical, and possibly dangerous. We understand, Jai-Ho said. Humanity has learned patience. We're willing to play by the rules. For now, he added silently. For now. Commander Dae-Sung Kim sat in the dimly lit control room of Earth Defense Command, his eyes burning from lack of sleep. 5 years had passed since first contact with the Galactic Confederation. 5 years of humans bending over backward to meet the countless regulations and restrictions placed on Deathworld species. 5 years of careful diplomacy, restraint, and compromise. Earth had been granted provisional Confederation membership last year. The celebration had been short-lived once humans learned what provisional truly meant. Limited travel rights, technology transfer restrictions, and designated colony zones far from established alien territories. Still, humanity had played along, establishing 3 colony worlds in the permitted sectors. The largest of these was Harmony Colony, home to over 12,000 civilians, mostly families seeking a fresh start. Its location on the edge of Confederation space wasn't ideal, but the planet was Earth-like and resource-rich. The colony had flourished despite the challenges. Dae-sung glanced at the time display. 300 hours. The night shift at EDC was typically quiet. He reached for his coffee when the emergency alert blared through the command center. Incoming priority transmission from Harmony Colony, called out Communications Officer Yuna Oh, her fingers flying over her console. Visual and audio, severely degraded. On main screen, Dae-sung ordered, standing up. The large display flickered to life, showing the chaotic scene. Governor Su Jin-yoon's face appeared, partially obscured by smoke. Behind her, people were running, and distant explosions could be heard. This is Harmony Colony, declaring an emergency. We are under attack. Su Jin's voice competed with warning alarms and screams in the background. Multiple ships appeared in orbit without warning. They're bombarding residential sectors. The image shook violently. A support beam crashed down nearby, sending sparks across the camera. Send help, Su Jin cried. They came without warning. We have no defenses. Her voice cracked with desperation. The feed cut to static, then briefly returned, showing burning buildings and figures moving through the smoke. Dae-sung recognized the attackers immediately from Confederation briefings. Vec warriors, notorious for their territorial aggression, despite being Confederation members. We've lost the connection, Yuna reported, her face pale. Get it back, Dae-sung snapped. Contact the Confederation emergency response immediately. Tell them we have a colony under attack by Vec forces. The command center erupted into activity. Dae-sung turned to his second-in-command. Wake up the President and the Joint Chiefs. I want our nearest ships diverted to Harmony immediately. Sir, his second replied hesitantly. The nearest Earth ship is the EDS Sentinel, 4 days away at maximum speed, and Confederation protocols forbid military response without approval. Dae-sung slammed his fist on the console. I know the protocols. Get on with it. For the next 3 hours, they managed to establish intermittent contact with Harmony Colony. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Vec had landed ground forces and were systematically moving through the settlement. Civilian casualties were mounting. The Confederation's response was maddeningly bureaucratic. They required forms, evidence of unprovoked aggression, and committee reviews before they would even consider intervention. They're stalling, Dae-sung muttered as he and his team worked desperately to coordinate any possible response. By sunrise, the President had authorized the deployment of every available ship, but everyone knew they would arrive too late. Their only hope was Confederation intervention, which still hadn't materialized. Sir, Yuna called out, her voice hollow. We've lost all contact with Harmony Colony. Last transmission reported Vec forces breaching the central shelter. Silence fell over the command center. Dae-sung closed his eyes briefly, the weight of 12,000 lives pressing down on him. Record all data, he finally said. I'm taking this directly to the Confederation Council. 3 days later, Dae-sung stood before the Confederation Council on their massive space station. The circular chamber held representatives from dozens of species, their alien features unreadable to human eyes. Dae-sung had spent the journey rehearsing his appeal, gathering evidence, and preparing for this moment. Honorable representatives, he began, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. 3 days ago, Harmony Colony was attacked without provocation by Vec forces. Our final casualty estimate stands at 8,142 deaths. The colony has been completely destroyed. He activated a holographic display showing the attack footage. Scenes of Vec ships firing on civilian structures played out in grim detail. The attack violated 17 separate provisions of the Confederation Charter regarding the treatment of civilian settlements. Daesung continued, I formally request immediate Confederation intervention to stop the ongoing Vec occupation and to bring the perpetrators to justice. The council chamber remained silent as the footage played. When it ended, the chief Mirror representative, HFY, leaned forward. Commander Kim, the Mirror said, its translator producing a flat, emotionless voice, the council acknowledges your presentation. Daesung waited for more, but the Mirror simply consulted a datapad. Our preliminary findings indicate that the Harmony settlement was established in a sector that the Vec consider within their historical expansion zone. That's impossible, Daesung replied, struggling to maintain his composure. We were explicitly granted colonization rights in that sector. I have the documentation right here. He sent the files to the council's shared system. Yes, HFY acknowledged. A clerical error on the part of a junior administrative official. Regrettable. Daesung stared in disbelief. A clerical error. 8,000 people are dead because of a clerical error. The Vec representative, a hulking reptilian figure with armored skin, made a dismissive gesture. Human colonies should have had proper defensive measures. The sector is known to be contested. We were forbidden from establishing military bases on our colonies. Daesung's voice rose despite his best efforts. The council specifically denied our requests for defensive installations 3 times. Another council member, a gelatinous being whose species Daesung couldn't recall, rippled in what might have been discomfort. Perhaps humans should reconsider their expansion goals. Slower growth would be more appropriate for a Deathworld species still adapting to galactic standards. Daesung felt his control slipping. This isn't about expansion. This is about the deliberate massacre of civilians, children, families. Regrettable, but expected outcomes when Deathworlders expand beyond their territory. The Mirror representative stated coldly. The Council recommends a more cautious approach to future colonization efforts. Daesung's knuckles whitened as he gripped the podium. 8,000 civilians. Children. His voice was barely more than a whisper now. The Mirror representative made a gesture to the Council Secretary. Let the record show that Earth's concerns have been noted. Now, moving to the next agenda item. Trade route adjustments in the Proxima sector. Daesung stood frozen in shock as the Council simply moved on, dismissing the death of thousands with bureaucratic indifference. The Vec representative didn't even bother to look in his direction, already engaged in discussion about trade routes. As Daesung left the chamber, a junior Confederation official handed him a datapad. For your records, the alien said, standard reparation calculations and approved relocation zones for any Harmony survivors. Daesung looked at the pad. The reparations amounted to a fraction of what the colony had cost to establish. The approved relocation zones were all in resource-poor systems that even the Confederation's lowest-tier members had rejected. In that moment, something fundamental changed in Daesung. The careful diplomat who had believed in the promise of galactic cooperation died, replaced by something harder and colder. He found a secure communication terminal and contacted Earth. When the president's face appeared on the screen, Daesung didn't bother with formalities. They're not going to help us, he said simply. They never were. The Vec won't be punished. The Council has already moved on. The president's expression darkened. I see. And what do you recommend, Commander? Daesung took a deep breath. It's time to stop playing by their rules, Madam President. It's time to show them what happens when humans stop playing nice. The underground command center beneath New Seoul hummed with activity. 70 meters below the surface, protected by layers of concrete, metal, and energy shielding, Earth's highest military and political leaders gathered around a circular table. The room was designed to survive anything short of a planetary collapse. President Sun Ma-yun sat silently, watching the final survivors from Harmony Colony on the large display. Medical personnel tended to burned and broken bodies. Children cried for parents who would never answer. Only 3,782 people had escaped the Vec attack. Less than a third of the colony. "Turn it off," Sun Ma finally said, her voice barely audible. The screens went dark. She looked around the table at the grim faces of Earth's Defense Council. For 15 years, these people had worked to protect humanity while navigating the complex rules imposed by the Galactic Confederation. For 15 years, they had built in secret while smiling in public. Commander Kim, Sun Ma addressed Daesung, who had returned from the Confederation Council 2 days ago. "Please summarize your report for everyone." Daesung stood, dark circles under his eyes. The Confederation Council has officially classified the Harmony Colony massacre as an unfortunate territorial dispute. They acknowledge a clerical error in approving our colonization rights in that sector. His voice remained professional, but his hands shook slightly. No sanctions will be imposed on the Vec. They've been granted full resource rights to what remains of Harmony. A hush fell over the room. General Bo Young Kwan, head of Earth's ground forces, broke the silence. "They're rewarding the Vec for killing our people." "Essentially, yes," Daesung replied. "The Council's official stance is that as Deathworld inhabitants, we should have anticipated potential threats and taken appropriate precautions. Precautions they explicitly forbade us from implementing." Minister of Defense Jun Ho Kang muttered. Sun Ma raised a hand to quiet the murmurs around the table. "Commander Kim, in your 15 years of diplomatic service with the Confederation, have you ever seen them take meaningful action to protect a provisional member's interests against a full member?" Daesung didn't hesitate. "No, Madam President. Not once." Sun Ma nodded slowly. She had expected this answer. "And based on your assessment, if we lodge further protests or demands for justice through official channels, they will be noted, filed, and ignored," Daesung finished, "just as the previous 17 human complaints have been." The room fell silent again. Sun Ma looked to Admiral Ta Wu Choi, head of Earth's Space Forces. He was the oldest person at the table, nearly 70, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Admiral," Sun Ma said, "your assessment of our current military positioning." Admiral Choi activated the room's holographic display, showing the Gnome Galaxy with illuminated points representing Confederation worlds, human settlements, and military assets. "The Confederation believes we have 27 combat-capable ships, all visible here." He pointed to green dots spread thinly across human space. "They believe our fastest ships are capable of sublight speeds only, with limited FTL capabilities borrowed from Confederation designs." He tapped his control pad, and hundreds of new red dots appeared throughout the display, many deep in Confederation space. "This is our actual fleet position as of 1 hour ago." Defense Minister Jun Ho leaned forward. "The hidden shipyards in the Kuiper Belt have exceeded production targets. We have 312 combat-ready vessels with full stealth capabilities and our proprietary FTL drives." "Which the Confederation doesn't know about," Sun Ma stated rather than asked. "Correct," Admiral Choi confirmed. "When we joined the Confederation, we were required to disclose all military technology. We complied by sharing outdated or modified designs. Our actual capabilities have advanced considerably beyond what they believed possible." Sun Ma steepled her fingers. "And Protocol Omega?" The room tensed. Protocol Omega had been developed in secret over the past decade, an emergency response option if humanity ever faced an existential threat from the Confederation. Admiral Choi slid a tablet across the table. "Protocol Omega is ready, Madam President. All assets are in position. Our people are embedded throughout Confederation space. The fleet awaits your command." Sun Ma didn't touch the tablet immediately. Instead, she looked at each person around the table. Before we continue, I want every objection heard. This decision will change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. There will be no going back. General Bo-young spoke first. Madam President, while I fully support decisive action, Protocol Omega represents a significant escalation. The Confederation has 37 full-member species with thousands of worlds. We're outnumbered. Numbers aren't everything, countered Admiral Choi. The Confederation military is fragmented by design. Each species maintains separate command structures. They've never fought as a unified force. Our models suggest they would take weeks to coordinate an effective response. Minister of Science Yeon-ji Park raised her hand. The technological gap isn't as wide as they believe. In several key areas, FTL navigation, stealth systems, targeting computers, we've actually surpassed them. They've grown complacent. The debate continued for nearly an hour. Sun Mai listened carefully to every point, asking occasional questions to clarify positions. When everyone had spoken, she stood. We tried cooperation for 15 years, she said quietly. We restricted our military. We followed their rules. We smiled while they looked down on us as primitive Deathworlders. We accepted second-class status in hopes of peaceful integration. She walked slowly around the table. And what did that earn us? 8,000 civilians dead. A colony destroyed. Not even the pretense of justice. She stopped behind Commander Kim's chair. How many more Harmony colonies before they respect us? How many more clerical errors will cost human lives? No one spoke. The weight of her words hung in the air. I've listened to your concerns, Sun Mai continued, and I recognize the risks. But I believe the greater risk lies in doing nothing. The VEC attacked us because they could. The Council dismissed us because they could. This pattern will continue unless we change it. She returned to her seat and looked at the tablet Admiral Choi had provided. To be absolutely clear, Protocol Omega is not about revenge. It's not about conquest. It's about establishing that humanity must be treated with respect. It's about justice for harmony. It's about ensuring that no other human colony suffers the same fate. She picked up the tablet and studied it. The activation sequence was simple, a fingerprint confirmation followed by a 6-digit code. The consequences would be anything but simple. The Confederation needs to understand that our restraint was a choice, not a limitation. Sun Mai said firmly, looking around the table one last time. They've mistaken patience for weakness. That ends today. She pressed her thumb to the tablet's scanner. The device beeped softly, confirming her identity. With steady fingers, she entered the activation code, 847,553. Execute Protocol Omega, she said. The tablet flashed once, then displayed a simple message, Protocol Omega activated. Admiral Choi immediately stood and moved to a secure communications terminal. This is Admiral Choi. Authentication code Sierra Tango 97 Echo. Execute Protocol Omega. Confirmation required. A series of acknowledgements came through as commanders throughout human space received their orders. The room's main display showed hundreds of ships suddenly changing course, moving with purpose toward their designated targets. Sun Mai watched the movement of the fleet with a strange calm. She thought of the children of Harmony Colony, of the Confederation Council moving on to trade routes while dismissing their deaths, of 15 years of condescension, and thinly veiled contempt. How long until the first phase is complete? She asked. 6 hours, Admiral Choi replied. All key targets will be secured simultaneously. The VEC will be contained before they even realize what's happening. Sun Li nodded. And the Confederation Council. Commander Kim allowed himself a small, grim smile. The Council is in session for another 3 days. Special Ambassador Jun Kang is already on station with his team. They'll deliver our terms directly. Good, Sun Mai said. She looked at the tactical display one more time, watching as humanity's hidden strength moved into position throughout the galaxy. The Confederation wanted Deathworlders, Let's show them exactly what that means. Special Ambassador Jun Kang stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel's shadow, watching as they approached the massive Confederation Central Station. Unlike the gleaming diplomatic ships that usually carried human representatives, the shadow was sleek, black, and unmistakably military. Its stealth systems were currently deactivated, allowing it to be seen as it approached the heart of Confederation power. "We're being hailed," reported the communications officer. "They're demanding we identify ourselves and state our purpose." They sound panicked. Jun straightened his formal diplomatic uniform. At 53, he had spent most of his career advocating for human interests in Confederation space. He had smiled through countless insults, navigated endless bureaucracy, and maintained his composure while watching humanity being treated as second-class citizens. Today, that would change. Inform them that Special Ambassador Jun Kang requests an immediate audience with the full Confederation Council to discuss the Harmony Colony incident, he replied calmly. Add that we will dock in 10 minutes regardless of their response. The communications officer relayed the message. Seconds later, the reply came. Ambassador, the Council is in emergency session. They say they will grant you immediate access. I imagine they would, Jun murmured. He turned to the two soldiers who would accompany him, Major Seo and Captain Yo, both veterans of Earth's Special Forces. Remember, we're not here to threaten. We're here to negotiate from a position of strength. The docking sequence was tense. Through the viewports, Jun could see Confederation security forces assembling in the hangar bay, their weapons drawn but not raised. News would be spreading quickly now. The Vec homeworld's orbital defense grid going dark simultaneously without a single shot fired. Key military installations throughout Confederation space, finding themselves surrounded by ships that seemed to appear from nowhere. Communications networks experiencing precise, targeted disruptions, all exactly as Protocol Omega had planned. The Shadow's ramp descended, and Jun led his small delegation onto the station. A Mira official rushed forward, its four arms moving in agitated patterns. Ambassador Kang, what is the meaning of this? The Mira demanded. We have reports of human military activity throughout Confederation space. This is a violation of. I will address the Council directly. Jun interrupted, something he had never dared do in 15 years of diplomacy. Take us there immediately. Perhaps it was his tone, or perhaps it was the reports flooding in from across Confederation space, but the Mira official simply nodded and led them through the station. As they walked, Jun noticed the atmosphere of barely controlled panic. Officials from various species huddled in corners, speaking in hushed tones. Security personnel moved with urgency toward unknown destinations. They reached the massive doors of the council chamber, which slid open to reveal chaos. The circular room, normally a model of decorum and careful procedure, had dissolved into shouting and accusations. Representatives from 17 different species were on their feet, gesturing wildly at data displays and each other. Jun stepped into the room, flanked by Major Seo and Captain Yo. For a moment, no one noticed them. Then, gradually, the chamber fell silent as attention turned to the human delegation. Chancellor HFY of the Mira, who chaired the council, spoke first. Ambassador Kang, explain yourself immediately. We have reports of human military vessels appearing throughout Confederation space. The Vec homeworld claims its defenses have been compromised. Jun walked calmly to the center of the chamber. Unlike previous appearances, where human representatives were assigned a small podium near the entrance, he took position at the central speaker's platform, a place reserved for full council members. 3 days ago, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. This council dismissed the deaths of 8,000 human civilians as a regrettable territorial dispute. You moved on to discuss trade routes while the bodies of our children were still being counted. He paused, looking around the chamber. The Vec representative was conspicuously absent. Humanity has spent 15 years attempting to integrate peacefully into the Confederation. We have followed your regulations, accepted your restrictions, and tolerated your condescension. We believe that cooperation and patience would eventually earn us equal standing. June activated a small device on his wrist. The large holographic display in the center of the chamber flickered, then showed a real-time tactical map of Confederation space. Red dots appeared throughout the display, each representing a human vessel. There were hundreds of them, concentrated around key Confederation military installations, shipyards, and government centers. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. "How did you bypass our detection systems?" demanded the Mira Chancellor, mandibles clicking in agitation. June smiled slightly. "We've had that capability for 12 years. You never asked." "Impossible," said the Trell representative, a crystalline being that rarely spoke during council sessions. "Our sensors would have detected ships of that size." "Your sensors detect what they're designed to detect," June replied. "Human engineers found the limitations in your technology a decade ago. We could have exploited them at any time. We chose not to." He tapped his wrist device again, and the display zoomed in on the Vec homeworld. 5 human destroyer-class vessels hung in orbit, their weapon systems clearly visible but powered down. "The Vec orbital defense grid is currently offline," Jim stated. "Their planetary shields have been deactivated. Their military communication networks are under our control. We did this without firing a single shot or causing a single casualty." The council erupted again, voices shouting over each other in alarm and outrage. Chancellor Selequar pounded a ceremonial staff on the floor until order was restored. "This is an act of war against the Confederation," the Chancellor declared. "The combined forces of 37 species will respond to this aggression." June nodded thoughtfully. "You could attempt that. But before you do, I should mention that we've also secured every major Confederation shipyard. Your fleet is effectively grounded. Additionally, we've identified and targeted the private shelters of every council member's family." He let that sink in before continuing. "Again, we have harmed no one. We don't intend to start." The chamber fell deathly quiet. "Now, shall we discuss the terms of our continued cooperation?" June asked pleasantly, as if suggesting lunch options. A Dravid counselor, known for their logical approach, leaned forward. "What are your demands, Ambassador?" June straightened. "First, immediate cessation of all Vec activity on or around Harmony Colony. Second, a formal investigation into the attack, conducted by a neutral third party. Third, full reparations to the survivors and families of the deceased." These were reasonable requests, and several council members nodded cautiously. "Fourth," Jum continued, his voice hardening, "the Vec military leadership responsible for ordering the attack will be surrendered to Earth for trial under human justice." This caused another stir, but Jun pressed on. "Fifth, human colonies will be permitted unrestricted defensive capabilities. Sixth, Earth will be granted full membership status in the Confederation with all associated rights and privileges. And finally, the classification of Earth as a death world will be removed from all official documentation, along with any policies that discriminate based on evolutionary origin." Chancellor Selekvar's black eyes narrowed. "These demands are unprecedented. The Council cannot be coerced." "This isn't coercion, Chancellor," Jun interrupted. "This is a correction of the power imbalance that has existed since first contact. You believed humans were primitives playing at civilization. You thought our cooperation stemmed from weakness. You were wrong." He deactivated the holographic display and looked around the chamber. "Humanity wanted peaceful integration. We still do. But peace must be built on mutual respect, not subjugation. The Confederation taught us that you only respect strength. So we are speaking to you in terms you understand." June stepped back from the podium. "You have 6 hours to consider our terms. If they are accepted, human forces will withdraw to a defensive posture. If they are rejected," he let the implication hang in the air, "I'll await your decision in the diplomatic quarters." As June and his escorts turned to leave, an elderly Seth representative called out, "How?" How did humans develop these capabilities while under Confederation observation? June paused at the door. The same way we survived on a death world, counselor. We adapted. We cooperated with each other instead of competing. We focused on solving problems rather than maintaining hierarchies. He smiled faintly. And most importantly, we learned long ago that appearing less dangerous than you are is sometimes the best protection of all. The doors closed behind them, leaving the council in stunned silence. As June walked through the corridors of the station, he activated his secure communicator. Madam President, Phase 1 complete. The council is deliberating. President Sunma's voice came through clearly. Well done, Ambassador. And the VEC. Contained. Their leadership is eager to negotiate. Good. Remind them that humanity's response has been measured and proportional. We could have done much worse. June thought of the Harmony Colony footage, the burning buildings, the children crying for parents who would never answer. They understand that now, Madam President. They understand exactly what happens when humans stop playing nice. 6 months after Protocol Omega, the Grand Chamber of Concordance on the neutral world of Elysium shimmered with light from a dozen different suns. The massive dome, constructed of transparent materials that had no equivalent on Earth, allowed the assembled dignitaries to see the stars above, a reminder of what united them. Jinna Ryu, Earth's newly appointed High Representative, stood quietly near the central table. At 36, she was young for such an important position, but her background in both military strategy and xenopsychology made her uniquely qualified for the new era of human Confederation relations. The chamber was filled with representatives from all 37 full-member species of the Galactic Confederation, plus the 12 provisional members. Earth would today become the 38th full member, the fastest elevation in Confederation history. Jinna watched the various alien delegations with careful attention. The Mira moved in small groups, their 4 arms constantly in motion as they spoke among themselves. The crystalline trail reflected light as they stood motionless in meditation. The aquatic Dravid floated in their personal environment suits, bubbles occasionally rising through the liquid. And then there were the VEC, once among the most feared and respected military powers in the Confederation. Their delegation now stood apart from the others. Their numbers were reduced, only 5 representatives instead of the usual 20. Their ceremonial armor, once adorned with trophies from conquered worlds, was plain and unadorned. The humbling had been thorough. "It's time," said Minho, Jinna's chief advisor, touching her arm lightly. Jinna nodded and moved toward the central table. The treaty had been negotiated over 6 difficult months. Each word had been debated, each clause examined from every angle. The result was a document that would forever change humanity's place in the galaxy. Chancellor Selek Var of the Mira, still holding the highest position in the Confederation despite the recent upheaval, raised his 4 arms for silence. The chamber quieted immediately. "We gather today to witness a historic moment in Confederation history," the Chancellor began, his translator conveying his clicks and whistles into standard Confederation language. "The Treaty of Elysium represents a new understanding between the peoples of the galaxy, an acknowledgement that diversity of evolution creates not hierarchy, but complementary strengths." Jinna kept her expression neutral, but satisfaction warmed her. This was diplomatic language for a complete reversal of Confederation policy. For centuries, the Confederation had classified species based on their evolutionary background, with Deathworld species like humans at the bottom of the social order. High Representative Ryu of Earth will speak before the signing ceremony, the Chancellor announced, stepping back from the central podium. Jinna moved forward, feeling the eyes of 100 different species upon her. She had practiced this speech carefully, working with linguists to ensure it would translate accurately across all Confederation languages. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice clear and steady. "6 months ago, humanity demonstrated that we were more than what the Confederation believed us to be. We showed capabilities beyond what was thought possible. We took action that some called aggressive and others called necessary. She paused, looking directly at the VEC delegation. They did not meet her gaze. But today is not about power. It is not about who can defeat whom. It is about understanding. For 15 years, humanity attempted to join your community by following rules designed to keep us contained. We dimmed our light. We bent our backs. We spoke softly. And we were ignored. Jinnah gestured to the treaty on the table before her. This document represents a new path. Not one where humans dominate, but one where all species recognize that different evolutionary paths create different strengths. None superior, none inferior, all necessary. She touched a small pendant at her throat, a piece of debris recovered from Harmony Colony. A reminder of why this treaty mattered. The 8,142 humans who died on Harmony will be remembered not as victims of aggression, but as the catalyst for change. Their sacrifice, unwilling and undeserved, has created the possibility for genuine peace. Jinnah stepped back from the podium. Chancellor Selekwar returned, raising a ceremonial stylus. The signing will proceed in order of Confederation membership, he announced. One by one, representatives approached the table. Some used appendages, others used specialized tools, and some used proxy devices to mark the treaty. Each signature method was unique to the physiology and culture of the species. Jinnah watched them all, noting the subtle body language. Most seemed relieved. Some, particularly the elder species who had dominated Confederation politics for centuries, seemed resigned. Change had come whether they welcomed it or not. Finally, only 2 delegations remained, Earth and the VEC. Jinnah approached the table. Unlike the others who had used various technological methods to sign, she produced an antique fountain pen, a deliberate choice to emphasize human tradition and history. The ink flowed smoothly as she signed her name in both English and Korean characters. Then came the VEC. Their leader, War Patriarch Keswick, had been stripped of most of his titles following the failed attack on Harmony. He approached the table slowly, his reptilian features unreadable. In VEC culture, being forced to sign such a treaty was the ultimate humiliation. The fact that he did so without protest spoke volumes about how thoroughly humanity had demonstrated its power. Keswick signed with a sharp talon, scoring the document deeply. When he finished, he looked directly at Jinnah and spoke without using his translator, knowing she had learned the basics of the VEC language. We underestimated. Will not happen again. It was as close to an apology as VEC culture permitted. Jinnah inclined her head slightly, acknowledging his words without offering forgiveness. The justice meted out to the VEC military leadership responsible for Harmony had been severe but fair. Reconciliation would take generations. As the ceremony concluded, delegates began to mingle. The new treaty created dozens of joint initiatives and cooperative projects that would require immediate attention. Humanity would now have representatives on every major Confederation council and committee. Chancellor Selekwar approached Jinnah quietly, using a private translator channel that others couldn't overhear. We misunderstood your patience for weakness, the Mira Chancellor admitted privately. A dangerous error on our part. Jinnah shook her head. No, you confused our preference for peace with an inability to wage war. The Chancellor's black eyes studied her. I have been reviewing your species' history. You fight even yourselves with remarkable creativity. We prefer not to, Jinnah replied simply. That's the point many species miss about humans. We don't avoid conflict because we can't win. We avoid it because we know exactly how horrible winning can be. The Chancellor's 4 arms made a gesture that the translator interpreted as thoughtful acceptance. The Confederation classification system is being revised as we speak. Earth will no longer be designated as a death world. What will we be called? Jinnah asked, curious. The taxonomists are still debating the exact terminology, Selekwar replied. But the current leading classification translates roughly as apex predators with voluntary restraint, or more colloquially, the dangerous ones who choose not to be. Jinnah allowed herself a small smile. That's accurate enough. As she departed the chamber, Jinnah heard whispers among the alien delegations. Word of Earth's new classification was spreading quickly. The Confederation species were struggling to adjust their understanding of humanity, not as primitive Deathworlders lucky to have survived their harsh planet, but as something far more complex and dangerous. Predators who had evolved beyond the need to constantly prove their strength. Back on her ship, Jinnah found a secure message waiting from President Sunmai. It was brief. Treaty confirmed. Phase 3 begins. Bring them home. Jinnah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. In accordance with the treaty, the human fleet that had maintained positions throughout Confederation space would now withdraw. The show of force had served its purpose. Now came the harder part, building genuine cooperation based on mutual respect rather than fear. She moved to the observation deck and watched as Elysium receded below them. The stars spread out before her ship, tens of thousands of worlds, most still unknown to humanity. Worlds that would now be open for exploration, trade, and settlement without the artificial restrictions of the past. Jinnah thought of Captain Jaiho Park, who had first met the Confederation 15 years ago, with hope and optimism. She thought of Commander Dae-Sung Kim, who had stood before an indifferent council pleading for justice. She thought of President Sunmai, who had made the hardest choice knowing the risks. And she thought of the Children of Harmony, who would never see this new era. We remember, she whispered to the stars, and we'll build something better from the ashes. As her ship engaged its FTL drive, using human technology now recognized as superior to Confederation designs, Jinnah felt a strange mixture of pride and caution. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not by hiding what they were, but by showing it fully. The galaxy now understood what happened when humans stopped playing nice. More importantly, they understood why humans chose to play nice in the first place. Not out of weakness, out of wisdom.